Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson. I'm your host of Tranquility du Jour, bringing you tranquility since 2005, and we just celebrated our 500th episode. Thank you so much for turning out for that. It was such a treat to be with you, and today is 501. So in this week's episode, I'm chatting with the lovely Mary and Emma of Lady Farmer, all about their new book, The Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living. Learn how to sow seeds of slow living, why slow food and slow fashion are important, and all about their 21-day slow living shift. Now, if you have not subscribed yet to the Tranquility du Jour podcast, I've got links over in the show notes, which can be found at kimberlywilson.com/501. A link to Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Overcast. So, of course, any of your favorites, you can subscribe and would love to be able to enter your world on a weekly basis with doses of tranquility. And now, if you're seeking past episodes, check out kimberlywilson.com/podcast for more episodes. And of course, we have the Tranquility du Jour podcast app for iPhones and Androids. So I've got two events coming up that I'm super duper excited to share with you. Okay, first of all, we've got our Fall TDJ Live, right? So this is where we connect every season, and we have for about 15 years to chat about 8 tranquility tools for this new season. And so the next one is happening on Sunday, September 20th from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And there's a link to sign up in the show notes. And of course, you can also find this over at kimberlywilson.com. The next thing I'm excited to share is I am creating an e-course. So my first brand new e-course in quite a while, and it's called the TDJ Lifestyle. And we're going to be exploring the 5 Tranquility du Jour tenets: creativity, compassion, mindfulness, style, and wellness. So stay tuned for that, and I'll be sure to share all the scoop about it and more when it's going to launch here on the podcast. Before we dive into our beautiful guests, I just want to say a big thank you for turning out for the 500th episode last Sunday night. It was just such a delight, and I loved being with you, and I'm so impressed that some of you have watched or listened to, you said at least 400 episodes, and a few of you were like, I think all of them, but I just need to double check. So, oh my gosh, that's amazing, because I know many of you have been listening from the beginning since September 2005. So thank you so much. And also, if you have a moment to write a review of the podcast over on iTunes, or any of the other avenues where you get your podcasts, be so grateful, because ideally my hope is that it helps spread tranquility far and wide. And so ideally we're helping get more tranquility into other people's lives, and especially with today's episode on slow living. I'm just so excited about this one, and I can't wait to dive in. So a little background on these two lovely ladies. Emma graduated from Sewanee, the University of the South, with a degree in American Studies and a minor in French. Upon graduating, she worked in outdoor adventure education until moving abroad to teach English in France, then back home to study design and aesthetics with Joy. She's always loved clothes and developing her own style, but it wasn't until learning of the environmental and humanitarian crisis that is the world's fashion industry today that she realized she could combine this love with an honest purpose and mission. Lady Farmer was born in this intersection and has evolved into so much more. Day to day, she works on designs, makes connections, and develops content while leaving time to get her hands dirty. Art and poetry keep her inspired, along with all her Lady Farmer friends with whom she learns things on a daily basis. Mary was born in Kingsport, Tennessee, surrounded by the hills of southern Appalachia. Writing and a sense of place have always been an important part of her journey. As she continues to weave the narrative of her own life, the connecting thread is the desire to teach and share stories and discoveries of each chapter. With 2 published works of fiction, Angel and All the Pieces, and the kids grown, she and her husband decided to realize a long-held dream and made the move to a small farm in Maryland. The homesteading lifestyle has fit her like pen to paper, and she spends the better part of every day outside, living and learning close to the rhythms of the natural world. It has taught her that life is better, healthier, and happier when we bring heart and passion to the basics. Being intentional about how we feed and clothe ourselves and ultimately how we live is her day-to-day goal. That's why she's teamed up with her daughter, the lovely Emma, to create a community of conscious creators in this exciting new paradigm. Mary's the writer, doer, teacher, encourager, and idea developer behind Lady Farmer. She brings her homesteading experience and lots of heart to the table, and she's so happy to join you. So I met Emma and Mary back in 2018. I went out for a Lady Farmer conference that they had at this beautiful setting. And I remember I took a photo of the goats and posted it on Instagram because they were very, very curious and coming up to the fence as I left. And I just remember being so enamored. And anyway, it was just a really joyful experience. Many sweet touches, from a mug that they gave us to a beautiful notebook that had like my name in beautiful handwriting on it. And, it's just like sweet touches throughout. And I really, really love the work they're doing. So when I found out that they had a book coming out, I just knew I had to have them on the show. Welcome, Mary and Emma.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Excited to be here.
It's a treat to have you guys on the show, and it was so fun to meet you at the Lady Farmer. Gosh, was it called a conference? A couple years ago I went in 2018.
Yes, we started calling it a conference, and then we decided as we were planning it that it was really more of a retreat. So then we were calling it a conference retreat. And then I think eventually we just dropped the conference. But yes, it's our slow living retreat. And we hope to do it as many years as we possibly can.
It's so fun. And so tell us a little bit about the story behind Lady Farmer. Like, where'd you guys get the name and how'd you come up with this concept?
Sure. So I'll take this one. This is Emma. I was living and working in Boston as the apprentice to a creative director. She was launching her own online business for online education for creatives, and which, this is about, I guess, 5 years ago now. So it was kind of when that was new, or more new than it is now. And I was nearing the end of my year with her. And I really, didn't have a direct job path or something to do. And I was really looking for like a creative project to kind of settle on. And I watched this documentary that was on Netflix at the time called The True Cost, which is a really great documentary about fast fashion. And it really opened my eyes and changed my entire perspective around fashion and its environmental and humanitarian impacts. And so I called my mom and I was like, "Oh, did you know about this? That like fashion is like an issue. It's a real problem, but also as consumers, it's kind of a thing that is changeable because we can just kind of change how we buy." And she was like, "That's really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about my own clothes and what feels good to me to wear. And like, I'm caring a lot more about natural fibers." And so it was just kind of this collaborative, like we were both sort of had our eyes open to this thing at the same time. And I think whether it was because I had an opening kind of in my life to start something new, maybe, and so did she, that we were kind of like, what if we designed our own clothing line out of natural materials and that's ethically produced? Which is a crazy idea. One of those ideas that you only have if you know nothing about that. But we liked this idea and we kind of latched onto it. And then the name sort of came up similarly. We both kind of, it's a disputed story, but it was kind of, the idea was, what if we made clothes for lady farmers? Because we live in this amazing agricultural farming community where we're surrounded by so many inspiring and creative women who are literally farming. And so we love the archetype of the woman farmer who cultivates land and grows things and provides for her community and her family, figuratively or literally. So we thought that the lady farmer was a beautiful archetype to sort of design for. So that's how we started, literally as a clothing line.
I love it. And how do you, because, one of the big premises, of course, of Lady Farmer is this idea of slow living. And I think you guys did a wonderful job of really emphasizing that in the conference/retreat and, the setting for it out at a farm. It was just all so beautiful. And I think people are curious, right, about how do I kind of slow down in this world? And so how do you all encourage people who are listening who may live in bustling cities or, may live in rural areas, but how do you encourage listeners to sow these seeds of slow living? And what does that look like?
Yes, well, we get this question a lot, of course. And we like to it's clear that when we say slow living, it doesn't mean like you're sitting back all the time with your feet up and doing nothing. It's more about being intentional about what you do and your consciousness about how you live every day. And particularly in the realm of consciousness around your daily needs, like where do your clothes come from? Where does your food come from? Where do the products that you use every day come from? What is in them? And when you start slowing down your mind, pay attention to these things, the very fundamentals of your daily life, the essentials of what you need to get through the day, then you do find that a lot of the outside stuff sort of starts to calm down and simmer down, and you have more of a focused, centered feeling about your day. And it's not something that happens all at once. We encourage people to just be relaxed about it and don't pressure yourself into making big changes all at once. Just pick one thing and say, okay, I'm gonna start paying attention to what my clothes are made of, for instance, and I want to wear things that are of natural fibers and are produced ethically and that are good for the planet and good for my health. And you just start there, just start one thing at a time. And so it's not really about speed or how many things you do in a day. It's more about your frame of mind and more about your intentionality and more about your paying attention to what you're doing and how you're spending your time and what you're using in the day, and your consumer habits. It involves a lot of behaviors. So we just like to tell people to start slow, start paying attention, and see what happens.
So tell us a little bit about slow food and what that means and how we can incorporate a little bit more of that into our lives.
Yes, well, that's a good example because we live in a society where we have become quite disconnected from the source of things we use every day, and particularly food. Most of the food we eat comes from several miles away, if not thousands of miles away, and is transported long distances, and it's it's a long way from its source by the time it gets to our plate. And oftentimes we don't know what's happened to it or what's been put on it or what it's been through by the time we're actually eating it. So, and then of course we've heard about fast food for years where you just, you pull up to a window and your food appears instantly. So the opposite of that would be slow food. So slow food is where where it comes from. It's as close as possible to what it is. It's hasn't been changed or processed. Like a vegetable is a vegetable. A piece of lettuce is straight out of the ground, and so it's as close as possible to its original form, and it's as close as possible from its source to your plate. and it's fixed in a way that doesn't diminish the nutrients and it doesn't diminish the flavor. And so you can enjoy, something that's close to the earth, that nourishes your body, and that you take time to prepare. And so it does require a bit of slowing down to really enjoy and embrace your food. So that's what we mean by slow food.
And it's also this idea, right, of mindful eating, We're really, I don't know if you guys know the mindful raisin exercise that John Kabat-Zinn does, but it's this idea of like, you look at the raisin, you feel the raisin, you squeeze the raisin, then you think about the farmers who grew the grapes and the people who, dried them and then transported them and boxed them and put them on shelves. It's like this whole process, right, as to like what goes into it versus, this idea of just driving up to the drive-through Taco Bell and grabbing your burrito and going on.
Yes, it is like a meditation. It is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you want to talk about that, Emma, a little bit?
Oh, I was just going to say I hadn't ever heard of that, but I'm going to look that up. I really like that.
Oh, it's great because the idea too, I mean, it's you eat a raisin so slowly. Like then you do one bite into it and you notice the juices. Like I'm salivating even just talking about it. And I'm not even a raisin fan, but it's like so intense, and then you chew it until it completely dissolves. And then you realize like, wow, I don't really even chew my food, So it's this idea of really getting in touch with the senses. So yeah, mindful eating, raisin exercise. And listeners, I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
We recently had what we call the Slow Living Challenge, and one of the weeks, the theme of one of the weeks was food, slow food, and we had a prompt in there where you prepared a whole meal, and so you meditated on every aspect of the meal like that, like where did it come from, and you thought about the sunshine that nourished the lettuce that grew for your salad, and the grass that the cow is grazing, and all that sort of thing. So yeah. It is a meditation when you slow down and think about your food, and something that you're integrating into your body for fuel and nourishment is particularly meaningful to give it that sort of time and deliberation.
Mm-hmm. Well, talk to us also about slow fashion. So, Emma, you mentioned The True Cost, and I have not seen that documentary yet, and I need to. I hear it's amazing.
Yes. So that documentary in particular is great. I love to recommend it because it's not one of these that you'll watch and just be really depressed at the world and just leaves you with a yucky feeling. It does expose a lot of really yucky things about the fashion industry, but the way that the filmmaker has put it together is actually really empowering. And it left me with a sense of wanting to literally start my own business. So that's one thing to be said for it. He kind of goes well into the different sections of the issues with the fashion industry. So the environmental impact and the humanitarian impact, and then the impact on our health. So there are tons of resources that go into the fashion industry, like most industries, but it's very water intensive, energy intensive. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of toxins in the dyes and things that are used. And in other parts of the country, since we have outsourced all of our garment or most of our garment manufacturing, the environmental restrictions are not as strong as here or in the Western world. And so it's perfectly acceptable to be dumping these toxins into rivers and the images that you see in the film are just really harrowing. And there's also the humanitarian issues of the massive use of slave labor just for the cheapest price. And then, of course, the cost to our health as far as the chemicals that are used on the plants to grow the fibers. So it kind of goes into each of those things. And then you kind of realize what all goes in to get you your very, very cheap pair of jeans from, whatever discount store that you feel you're getting a good deal. But really, when you look into the source of that garment and you think about everything that has been gypped along the way, whether it's human labor or environmental impact, it's really kind of tragic. And at what cost, or like, what's it for, to what end, so that we can buy more stuff. And it sort of flips everything on its head. And it's really the basis for a lot of what we do and talk about.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you may have the data on this, but how many pounds of clothes Americans throw away a year? I mean, it's massive.
Yeah, it's something like 80 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? Is that right, Mom? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an average of 80 pounds a year per American ends up in the landfill.
I mean, that's massive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you all think about thrifting, right? Because that's so, versus buying new.
Sure. Thrifting is great. It's the most sustainable way to buy. So the most sustainable thing would be for everyone to stop making new stuff. I would say even us, we would need to stop producing new things. And just only if we all just stopped and just subsisted off what already exists in the world, there's already way too much, right? But the problem is that we do love to buy things and we do love to buy new things. So Lady Farmer's kind of approach is, well, let's create new things, but let's make them ethically and responsibly and with natural materials, and let's support those industries so that we are creating more of a demand for the organic cottons, and we're creating more of a demand for domestic labor. So yes, thrifting is number one. But even still, the thrift stores in the age of Marie Kondo and all of this, thrift stores are overwhelmed. There's a ton of secondhand, I just lost my train of thought. Thrifting is great. We love thrifting.
So let's talk about setting up a slow space. So you mentioned earlier about Marie Kondo and how everyone got super into that after her piece came out on Netflix, and it's like the thrift stores were inundated with everyone's stuff they didn't want anymore. And so I'm curious, how do you encourage people to set, what is a slow space, and how do you encourage people to set it up?
Well, we think of a slow space as a place in where your living space or your workspace, or maybe a space outdoors, just somewhere where you spend time, where you can feel a sense of ease and peace and presence of mind. And we all have areas in our spaces that are maybe irritating to us, like, oh, it's cluttered, or oh, there's too much going on here and I don't feel good when I'm here. But you really have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to how you feel in your spaces. And then once you realize that a space does not make you feel at ease or peaceful, you can look around and decide why. So in our book, we encourage people to identify these spaces and spend time either decluttering or rearranging, taking things out, putting things in that make you feel good. And really just all the while assess how you are feeling in that area. And if you do this little by little, all over all the spaces where you spend time, pretty soon you'll find yourself really living in a more peaceful place. And you can create better feelings. You can create a more easy way of being by transforming your spaces if you just pay attention and identify what you think needs to be changed. I think a lot of what we're talking about, slow living and it's just all about consciousness and intentionality and paying attention to what you're doing and how you're spending your time and where you are. And we can really transform our whole experience of being just by tuning in to our feelings and paying attention.
Yeah, and this idea of identifying the problem areas, it's funny as you were saying that, I'm just kind of looking around my space, which is tiny, and, and I have 4 pets and what have you. And so it's there's so many problem areas, right? But it's but it's all stuff I love. And yet, it doesn't evoke ease in the same way that, a nicely organized kind of minimalist sort of space could. And so what do you recommend for people who are I want to have a more organized, intentional space, and yet I struggle to know where to start?
Well, we have this little 10-minute exercise that we talk about in the book, and it's easy and it's fun. So you identify a space like that that's making you feel not at ease, and empty it completely, take everything out. And then one item at a time, you place it back in and you pay attention. What does this do to the space? What does this do to me? How does this make me feel? And you'll reach a point where, oh, this is good. I'm going to leave it like this. This is the way it's going to be for a while. And then, you think, oh, but all these other things, I like them. I want them too. Well, you can put them away and get them out later, find another place for them, or maybe you feel like you can let them go. A quick example, there's this corner of my kitchen where we had this little toaster oven, and the counter was always really cluttered, but this toaster oven was in constant use, and the toaster oven started making funny noises, and I thought it sounded like it was about to go. And also, every time it came on, the lights dimmed, so it seemed like it was like using a lot of energy. So one day I unplugged it and I moved it away, and I put something else there. And it was the most refreshing thing. Every time I looked in that corner, I thought, oh, that's so pretty. That feels so much lighter. That gives me pleasure when I'm looking over there instead of, that's so cluttered over there. I took out one item, rearranged things a little bit, and it completely transformed my experience of looking in that direction. And when you do that, it really changes the chemicals in your body. It affects your stress hormones. It really affects everything. So if you can identify those places where you're feeling irritated and not good and less than peaceful in your home, you can transform those spaces.
I love that. I think it's a great reminder, because I think about even, you get like schedules for a yoga studio or, my dog's daycare, like notes, and I put all that on the refrigerator, and then after a while, it just becomes like mayhem. And whenever you pull that stuff from the refrigerator, like the cute photos and stuff, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like you can exhale, right? So it's just a funny example. Yeah.
Yeah. When you open up space in your surroundings, you open up space in yourself and your body and even your lungs. It's just things open up. It's true.
Now, talk to us about how we can treat the earth as our home. So you have that as a piece in your book, and I thought it was really great and would love to share it with our listeners.
The earth is our home. It's the one thing all human beings have in common. Well, human beings have a lot of things in common, but in terms of where we live and what we need to survive, we all share the earth. And at some point in our development as a human race, and it probably goes way, way back, we kind of got the idea that we were separate from nature, or we were separate from the earth, and we needed to control nature rather than cooperate with it. I think one good example of this is, for instance, the agricultural revolution. It happened between 10 and 12,000 years ago. And that's when humankind went from being hunter-gatherers and just gathering their food from their surroundings. And when there wasn't any more food, they moved on and went somewhere else, just staying one place and growing all the food in one place. Well, to do this, they had to cultivate the land around them and plant things and develop crops. And that began a very long and arduous history that we're still now experiencing of, agriculture. Agriculture is a lot of work, and it really is hard for humans to control the earth in a way that produces enough food for us. So this is one example of where we sort of departed from cooperating with nature to trying to gain ascendancy over it. And you look all through human history and you see many, many, many examples of this, and to the present day where we think that nature is just something that's there for our use instead of the source of everything we need. So I think it's just a matter of changing our perspective, of looking at things differently, of understanding that we are dependent on the earth for every breath we take, everything we eat, for our entire being. In fact, we're not separate from the earth. We are part of the earth. We are part of nature. And I just think that as we move through this current crisis we're in, we're going to become more and more attuned to that. And this very thing we're going through with the coronavirus is helping to turn all of our eyes in a different direction than we've been going the last many, many decades. And I think things will be different now. We're beginning to look at things a little bit differently.
Right. I agree. One of the things you have in the book is a 21-day slow living shift. And that's a mouthful, but I love it. And so tell us a little bit about, what are some ways in which we can get started with this slow living shift?
Well, the slow living shift was designed as a way to very specifically take some of the concepts in the book and kind of address them in a little bit every day, because even this like sweet little approachable, friendly book, I think it's easy to get almost overwhelmed by all of these different concepts and this information. And oh my gosh, I kind of have to change everything, which isn't true. That's not helpful either, because when we're overwhelmed, we just don't do anything, right? So the idea with the shift was to kind of break it down into little bite-sized pieces and 21 days, because as they say, it takes 21 days to start a habit. And so if after 21 days you've done a little thing every day, then you've probably shifted in a very significant way. So, a lot of them are like little journal prompts, or, nothing you even have to write down sometimes, but just different thought prompts or little exercises that kind of take you through each of the things. And even some of them, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at them, Kimberly, but some of them are like, go back and refer to, the prompt from a few days ago and think about how you feel differently now. And so it's kind of like a little self-guided slow living challenge.
Yeah, I think it's fun. And I love the kind of the week one that you're doing right now too.
Yeah, we did a 5-week one recently where we had a different theme every week. And it was great. It just ended.
Yeah, I've been getting them. They're great.
Yeah.
So tell us, in closing, like I have just a couple more questions, and I'd love to know some of your favorite resources. Like, where would you send our listeners who would like to learn more about this?
A shameless plug for a podcast that we just launched. It's called the Good Dirt Podcast, and we've been interviewing different experts in each of the areas that we kind of talk about. So anyone that we are interviewing on our show is someone that we look to for guidance. So in particular, we have, someone that we just interviewed as a local farmer in Virginia. We talk a lot about farming and we think a lot about farming. We look to anyone who's an expert in regenerative agriculture, which is kind of the new step beyond sustainable agriculture. And it's more about healing the soil, not just sustaining it, but really healing things. And a great person to look to for regenerative agriculture is also Joel Salatin of Polyface Farms. He's a very famous farmer. That's kind of the main one that I would refer people to if they know nothing about regenerative agriculture, which is a basis of what we talk about a lot. Mom, what about you? Where do you send people?
Well, I'll give another shameless plug for our very own book, The Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living, that is coming out officially next week, March 31st. And you'll be able to get it straight from our website. And it has all of these things in it, plus a whole list of resources in the back. And a whole bunch of information.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at our resource list. We also love Wendell Berry. We love, Elizabeth Klein wrote a great book called Overdressed, if you're looking for more sustainable fashion, and then another one called Conscious Closet. But yeah, anything and slow food, slow fashion. Yes.
There's one, it's called Eat Wild, and it's written by, I believe it's Joan Robinson. And
Eating on the Wild Side, right?
Eating on the Wild Side, yes. That's a really good one for shopping for nutrient-dense foods, or growing nutrient-dense foods, what to pick when you're, in the grocery store, how to tell if something's fresh or has been sitting there for several weeks. That's a really good one.
Great. Well, thank you. These are wonderful. And listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes to these. And then my last question for you ladies is the name of this podcast is Tranquility du Jour. So I'm curious, how do you two find tranquility in your everyday?
I love that that's the name of your podcast. It's a lot like slow living. Tranquility every day. I make sure that I am not having any inputs from my phone or my email or anything in the morning before I'm able to like journal or have a few minutes to myself. And I find that makes a huge difference. If I start the day out in my own space before I kind of absorb, whether it be news or social media, that just makes the whole day different for me.
Yes, and I also enjoy a quiet time in the morning with my cup of coffee and just sort of sitting and not really having to do anything. And before that, when I first wake up, I'll meditate for 20 minutes. I've done that for several years. And I also take time every day, if possible. Most every day I'll take a long walk, which I really, really enjoy. It is really important to my peace of mind. So just a few habits in the day that you can depend on to sort of reset, really, really do wonders.
Great. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for being here and for chatting all things slow living and lady farmer.
Thank you so much for having us.
We always enjoy talking about these things. It's really fun.
So over in the show notes, you'll find links to Lady Farmer, their Instagram, website, book, Facebook, and they have a podcast. Also resources, a few of the resources we discussed. The True Cost, Mindful Eating Raisin Meditation, Windleberry, Conscious Closet, Overdressed, and Eat on the Wild Side. So all of these are linked over in the show notes for you. So let's stay connected. Find us over on Facebook in the Tranquility du Jour Insiders Facebook group, where I share resources. You can get inspiration, make connections. It's an amazing group. And be part of the online book club, which is all about the Chiffon Trenches by Andre Leon Talley. And let me tell you, it's amazing. I'm 75% through and I adore this man. It's so good. Now, those of you who are new to Tranquility du Jour, I've got a link in the show notes also on how to find out more and how to get more involved. Also, there's a link to sign up for my weekly Inbox Love Notes, where you get invites, inspiration, and more. There's also a link to my 6 books and planner, ways to follow Tranquility du Jour on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and a link to my seasonless vegan, locally made, eco-friendly fashion line, Tranquility, soon to be TDJ by Kimberly. And I announced that over on social media last week and on the blog Sunday night. So I'm really excited to share with you this evolution that will be happening, morphing over the next few weeks. And then hopefully by fall, we will be all set up for you. So thank you again for being here, and thanks for inviting me and my guests into your day. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Have a great week. Namaste.